Welcome back to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always joked that her life should be a book or a movie, and honestly, she might be right. I've spent my whole life hearing these stories, and I think they're too good to keep to ourselves, so we're sharing them with you, one episode at a time. So, Mom, what are we talking about this time?
Well, we're going to start off with a topic that anyone who's been listening to this podcast knows really well by now.
What's that?
My complaining about driving in Athens. So I'm going to put the unmentionable out there
Oh no.
and admit that driving in Athens is not my forte. I'm sorry, guys. I now finally have to admit it. What it actually feels like to me is like I'm back in my teens and I'm playing an arcade car game. You know, one of these ones where you get given a steering wheel and you're watching a screen and things are coming at you.
Yeah, Mom, I know them well, but you're kind of describing it in a very threatening way.
Jo, it actually is quite threatening because in the game, the car crashes, is a crumpled heap, and then you get the next life and it starts off normally. In real life, you'd have to send that car to the panel beaters, deal with the insurance, have your husband staring at you disapprovingly, have people judging you, all sorts of things. But you do still feel the same way while you're driving in Athens. And I'm going to put it out there for our listeners that have been brought up in Greece, especially the Athenian ones. You're completely used to this, I understand. But if you ever move anywhere else in the world, you'll realize that driving isn't necessarily an obstacle course.
It's meant to be a lot easier than this.
It's meant to be a lot easier because in Greece, you firstly have to avoid all the parked cars. And there are permanently parked cars everywhere. So although in the game there'd be a wall that you could stay against, these are parked cars. And not everybody has got good parking skills. Some people are like me and they park their cars badly with either the back side of their car sticking out or the front side of their car sticking out. And while you very skillfully dodging these parked cars, a motorbike comes up on the one side of you and you think, I'm used to this. I'm a good Greek driver. You avoid the guy coming up on your left side, and while you concentrate on him, 3 guys come up on your right side. So it really ends up being quite a harrowing experience, especially for someone who grew up in Johannesburg in South Africa, where the roads are actually wide and two-way streets are designed to take 2 cars driving on the street and even a parked car if necessary, although it usually isn't necessary because there are parking spaces for cars.
It's actually real parking.
There actually is real parking. Anyway, but on this particular occasion, I wasn't heading down those streets, not for long anyway. I was actually heading to one of my favorite places to drive because I've been driving there more than anywhere else and I'm starting to get used to it, the airport.
Ooh, the airport.
Yes, Jo. So if you remember, this is when I was dropping you off at the airport and then I was going to take your doggy to the kennels.
Yeah, thanks for that, by the way.
You're welcome, Joey. And you remember what happened on the way to the airport?
I do.
There was just some minor details, like my GPS kept turning itself off.
It was so stressful, and I'm not even good at directions, and I was in charge of directions, and it was not a good thing for either of us.
It really wasn't a good thing because Jo was behind me. She was sitting in the back seat with our doggy Zoe, who was getting ready to go to the kennels, and Jo was directing from the back seat with hand signals. She'd say, "Mom, turn." I was supposed to, through the seat, guess.
I mean, if you could believe this, guys, I had a complete mental block for the words left and right, which I don't even know how that's possible.
I believe you, Jo.
Well, that's because you were there.
But eventually, with my vast 3-month driving experience in Athens and Jo's slightly unorthodox navigation skills, we made it to the airport.
In one piece.
In one piece, I dropped off Jo, and that's where my adventure began. I started off by taking little Zoe for a nice walk around the airport. I thought she might get some nice new smells. She might be able to find some plants that might entice her to do her bodily functions. And we walked around for a bit, but it was getting really hot. It was getting uncomfortably hot. And if you remember, Jo, in the airport, I tried to get her to drink some water.
Yes. Zoe loves to choose dehydration over hydration.
Exactly. So I was getting a bit anxious that the dog was getting dehydrated. And I thought, you know what? Let's just go to the kennels, which she absolutely loves. They call it a doggy hotel in Greece. And she loves going there. And I thought, let me just drop the doggy off because she's my precious cargo now. So we went to the pay station and I put in my ticket. And obviously, I would have picked the faulty ticket.
Of course.
Right. So the pay station couldn't read my ticket. And I was getting anxious, and I was getting very anxious that the dog's feet on the floor must be burning. I was beginning to sweat. And then I noticed what other people were doing. And what they were doing is they would get into their cars and they would drive to the pay station and then leave their car right there, block everybody else, and go in and sort out their ticket. And I thought, okay, listen, when in Rome
And in this heat,
or when in Athens, do as the Athenians do. So I took Zoe, strapped her in her car seat, drove around to the pay station, and I thought, I'm going to sort out my faulty ticket now. So I felt a bit guilty because I was leaving the dog in the car. And you know, everyone's heard these horror stories about people leaving their children or their dogs in the car and they die because of heat. And even though I would be leaving her 2 meters away from me, I was quite anxious.
I mean, I would be anxious too.
Exactly. So what I did is I opened all 4 car windows and then went to sort out the ticket, where eventually I was told that by some guy that answered a couple of minutes later that, listen, don't worry about it, just get to the exit, and when you get there, call for help again and someone will assist you and you'll be able to pay at the exit. I got to the exit a little bit frazzled, had to wait for the guy for, 5 minutes. It felt like forever because cars were coming up behind me. And I used that time wisely to put the kennels into my GPS and hope and pray that the GPS is not going to let me down this time and just turn off while I'm driving, because I noticed that I would have to be on the highway. And finally, Zoe and I set off. And Zoe has this habit when you're driving. It's a cute little habit of her wanting to put her head on your arm. But this time, because I was driving on my own, I had actually put her in the back seat. And while
In a little car seat.
in her little car seat, which I had installed a little bit incorrectly, but that's besides the point. And she managed to get out of her car seat, but she was still attached to the back seat. I didn't know this because as I was driving now on the highway and I was focused on getting to my destination, I felt this little tickle on my arm. And I wondered, how did Zoe's little whiskers get all the way from the back seat to where my arm was? And I thought, I know she's got a long neck, but it's not that long. And I looked down at my arm, ready to say how cute, and I realized that from the time I had left the windows open, obviously a wasp had flown in. And now, oh no, exactly. There was a wasp sitting on my arm. Now, I don't know what any of you guys would have done, but I did what I usually do, which is scream and start slapping myself wildly. I think I bruised my arm. The car was going left and right, and God sent about 700 angels to protect me at the time because somehow I didn't hit anyone.
If I was in your position, Mom, I for sure would have crashed the car somehow because I would be screaming and swerving like you've never seen anyone scream or swerve before.
I was doing all of that, and at the back of my mind was the thought that this is a wasp, not a bee. So it's not going to die after it stings me once. It has the ability to sting me multiple times. And this was going through my head, and my arm suddenly looked clear. Zoe was safely strapped in the back seat. But I'm sure you guys have had this sensation before, where once a little creepy crawly has been on you, you start feeling crawling elsewhere on your body.
Oh, it's the worst feeling. I hate it.
I absolutely hate it too, and I kept feeling it. So I had no idea where this wasp was, but I would feel something on my thigh and I would be slapping myself wildly. I was slapping my calf. I was slapping my other arm. I could have actually gone to a police station straight after that and reported some domestic abuse, and they would have believed me. I looked frazzled. My hair was flying and I was literally beating myself all over my body. It was so scary.
You know what, Mom? It sounded scary when you first told me the story. It sounds just as scary now. And on top of that, I'm just getting this overwhelming feeling that you have this weird thing with bugs and creepy crawlies.
Unfortunately, Jo, I think you may be right. But bugs and creepy crawlies and the sensation of things crawling on your body reminded me of this very, very special human being I once met many years ago, and I really wanted to tell this story. So, Jo, when you guys were little and I was going through a divorce, I took on as many jobs as I could, working as a physiotherapist, obviously, each time. But I was working in several hospitals simultaneously. And one of the areas that used to pay really well as a physio, and you can get in a lot of pay with less time, is working in ICU. And the way it usually works in ICU in the hospitals in South Africa is that there will be 3 or 4 physiotherapists working in that same ICU, and each one has their specific patients that they're assigned to because they may be working with a particular doctor.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, and I'm not sure, Jo, if I'm nosy, curious, or friendly, or all of the above. So while walking towards my assigned patients, I tended to look left and right to any other people in the beds, and if any of them caught my eye, if their eye caught mine, I would smile at them. I thought they might need a bit of encouragement or moral support while lying in ICU. And on this particular occasion, a guy's eye caught mine in one of the beds, and I looked at him and I smiled at him. He obviously couldn't smile back because he was on a ventilator, but he wasn't sedated. And a tear trickled out of his eye.
Shame, man.
That's exactly what I thought. And I went up to the guy and said, "Are you okay?" Which is a bit of a dumb question to ask. Firstly, he's in ICU. Secondly, he's on a ventilator. How exactly okay is he going to feel? And I could see the tears welling up in his eyes and streaming down his face. I felt so awful. And I went and read his chart. That's where the nosy comes in. And what I saw there were these 3 capital letters, GBS.
Okay, Mom, for the non medical people out there like me, what does GBS stand for?
GBS stands for Guillain-Barré syndrome. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly because it's French, and it is a very rare autoimmune disease. It's something we were taught at university, and it's something most physiotherapists go through their entire life and their entire careers and never come across it. And I've come across it only twice in my life. Now, Guillain-Barré is one of these awful conditions where your body suddenly looks at your peripheral nerves. Now, your peripheral nerves are the ones that are not in your brain and your spinal cord. Those are called your central nerves. So your peripheral nerves suddenly get seen as foreign by your body, and your own antibodies begin to attack your peripheral nerves. They don't attack the nerves themselves. What they do is they attack something called the myelin sheath around the nerves. Now, just to put it out there for lay people that are not medical, our nerves conduct electrical impulses through our body. And just like electrical wires in your home have got the protective plastic insulation around them, so our peripheral nerves in our bodies have got something called a myelin sheath. And in this disease, your nerves attack the myelin sheath. And once this fatty sheath protection around nerves is disrupted, it disrupts the electrical impulses that your muscles are getting. And slowly, your muscles are unable to function. They don't get the signal that they need to contract, and so they don't. It starts off with like a tingling of your fingers or toes because it seems to start from your extremities and work its way up your body. And it's one of these conditions where the sooner you figure out that you have it, the sooner you can do something about it and you have a better chance at making a complete recovery.
So there's a cure.
No cure, but what they actually do is almost similar to dialysis. They use something called plasmapheresis, where what they do is almost filter your blood. Take your blood out your body and filter it and remove the antibodies that are attacking the myelin. So it all depends on how quickly you get to hospital once you know you have this condition.
That's so hectic.
It's very, very hectic, and most people figure it out before it gets to their lungs and their diaphragm. But in this particular case, this dear soul that was on this bed with tears welling up in his eyes, he was already on a ventilator. So unfortunately, his particular case, his condition had gone quite far because unfortunately it had reached his breathing muscles. So he was unable to breathe on his own. And I could only imagine how scared this man must feel. And because this was the first time in my life I was seeing this condition, I'd only learnt about it at university, but I did remember that there is a really, really good chance of making a full recovery. Sometimes it takes years, especially in people who get to this point, but
there's still hope.
There's definitely still hope. And seeing him with the tears streaming down his face, I wanted to let him know that there is still hope. I had no idea how much he had been told about his condition or what was happening, and I felt really, really bad for this man. So I went and found a tissue or a Kleenex, and I dabbed his eyes, and I said to him, "You will be okay. You're going to get up and walk again, and when you do, I'd like you to ask me to dance, and I will dance with you." Now, why I chose to say that to this man that I've never seen in my life before, but I did.
It's really sweet of you.
Thanks, Joey. Now, just to put it out there again, back to the medical stuff, is that once you've started treating this condition, it takes you a long time to recover because your myelin sheath on your nerves starts repairing itself at 1 millimeter a day. Now, if you picture a nerve, a long nerve going from your spine to your fingertips or from your spine to the tips of your toes, you can just imagine 1 millimeter a day is slow.
It's tiny.
And so this dear soul was in ICU for a long time. In fact, he was on a ventilator for 3 months. At that point, they stop the ventilator from being down your throat and they make a hole in your trachea to make life more comfortable and to make it easier. And what happens with people that have Guillain-Barré syndrome is slowly, you help the muscles start working again. And this is a long and tedious process. And because of this, this man had many different physiotherapists. Before, eventually, he became my patient, I used to always walk past and give him a smile and say a few words to him. I felt really bad because he couldn't answer me. It's probably the ideal person to talk to. My husband would love that. And probably the most frustrating thing for someone going through this is that they can't talk to communicate and they can't use any other means. Their hands don't work. They can't write anything.
That must be very frustrating.
Extremely frustrating. And interestingly enough, I would have thought that that's the most frustrating thing. But later on, when eventually this man got to talk and him and I got quite close because I was treating him for a good number of months, he told me what the most frustrating thing about this condition was.
Which was?
Believe it or not, and that's what made me think of my insect story. He said the worst thing was having an itch or having sensations on your body that something is touching you or something is tickling you and you can't respond by doing what I was doing, flapping my arms wildly in the breeze.
That must be hell.
It must be the most awful thing. And what he would tell me that he would do is he said if he had an itch on some part of his body, he would, in his mind, and he said this kept him sane, would pretend that he had control of an army of ants. And he said he would send these ants to various parts of his body and tell them, scratch here.
That's very creative problem solving.
I'm sure you need creative problem solving in a situation like that. But he got even more creative than this. I did mention that for most of the time, the dear man couldn't speak, and so he listened to me. And I was going through a divorce at the time. I think I drove him insane with all my stories. I would tell him that this happened, that happened, and now I'm in this problem and I don't know how to deal with this. And I would be telling him everything. Eventually, he got to a point where we were retraining his breathing. And what we could do is take him off the ventilator, disconnect him for 30 seconds, and then we would reconnect him and he would be breathing on his own for those 30 seconds. And why I'll never forget him, and he'll always have a special place in my heart, is he used those various 30 seconds to tell me short snippets of things. And he would gasp and say, "Get me my cell phone." And I'd get him his cell phone, he'd be back on a ventilator. Then he would say, "Go to my contacts." And we would carry on like this. And what I realized is how meaningful that first experience of me wiping his tears and telling him he'll dance again was for him. So what this man did for me with his 30 seconds is he had a long-standing friendship with the biggest, most famous, and too expensive for me to afford divorce lawyer in South Africa at the time.
Oh, wow.
And during these 30 seconds, we eventually called the guy, and all he could do is say hello to him, and I'd connect him back to the ventilator, and he'd say, "I have a friend here," and we'd connect him back again, and then he'd say, "Please help her."
Wow.
And
Like, I've got goosebumps.
exactly. And I was getting free advice from the top divorce lawyer in South Africa who would have never accepted my case because I didn't have enough money to pay him. And it was so profound for me that this man would use the few moments that he had to speak, because he only had literally 30 seconds at a time and then had to be put on a ventilator for at least another minute. He would use those precious moments to try and help me out instead of talking about his problems and how he was feeling. And all of this was because of that initial connection that we had. He actually told me later on, once he was off the ventilator completely and he could speak, how meaningful that had been for him and how nobody else seemed to care. Everyone just thought of it as a medical condition. And because this man needed very intensive physiotherapy more than once a day, there were many physios that were treating him. And understandably, he would get frustrated. And often patients that are frustrated lash out at their physios. They get angry. They might be angry if you show up late, or angry if they're finding an exercise too difficult. And he would lash out at everybody except me. I was his star physio, even though there could have been others that might have been better than me. To him, I was the best just because I cared, not as a physio, but as a human being. And him and I have continued a friendship over the years. We eventually lost touch. I spoke to him the last time a couple of years ago, but every now and then I send him a message to see how he's doing. And although he's doing really well, he hasn't gotten to the point of dancing yet.
Oh, I was just going to ask about that.
He needs crutches still when he walks. And although he is married and has 2 children, I always say to him, when you're ready to dance, remember my number. I'll hold you to that.
I hope that you do get to fulfill that promise one day, Mom.
I hope so too, and I hope he fulfills it with anybody. It doesn't have to be me. I hope one day he can dance without crutches and just enjoy himself again. So that was my profound insect story, and every time or any time I feel anything crawling on me or touching my skin or creeping me out, I always think of this man. I don't think I can ever forget him.
No. And on that note, what are the lessons that we learned this episode?
Well, I would say, firstly, don't sweat the small stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say it's probably a good thing to check your car for bugs before you set off on a long trip.
Especially if you're the type of person like us who gets freaked out by them.
Especially then. And also always be kind. You have no idea how much someone around you needs it or appreciates it.
Very true. And going from that, what are we grateful for this week?
Well, I would say firstly, I'm grateful that GBS is a rare syndrome and we don't see it very often. I'm grateful that Zoe, myself, and all the other Athenian drivers on the highway got out of this story unscathed.
Me too. I'm also grateful for that. I'm grateful that this guy, from what I'm hearing from you, is making a recovery.
Absolutely. And I'm also eternally grateful to him, someone who was going through so much of his own that he could stop and take the time to help me out. I'll always be grateful for that.
And on that note,
thank you so much for listening.
We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode and you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, however you're listening to us right now.
Thank you so much for all the support, and remember to tune in again next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.